growing. Today I can tell you, I
More
talk
than
to young
five?
people
More
that
than-
talk about non-binary as
More than 5?
I think that gender is not a binary, is what I'm trying
But
to say.
are there more than 5 genders? I'm just trying to understand. Are there more than 5 genders?
This hearing went completely off the rails the second Senator Kennedy asked one simple question: how many genders are there? And somehow nobody could give him a straight answer.
Ms. Robinson, I want to follow up by trying to understand your answer to one of Senator Cruz's questions. And this is really a question, not a suggestion. Do I understand your position to be that there are 2 sexes, but there can be more than 2 genders?
I wouldn't even say 2, and we've got Dr. Lopez here as well, but there's also the definition of intersex. I think that often in these conversations we're conflating sex and gender, and I do want to affirm here that trans women are women. That is their gender.
Okay, but I'm trying to understand. Do you make a distinction between sex and gender?
Yes, sir.
Okay, explain that. Do you think there are more than 2 sexes?
I believe that there's a definition for intersex as well that I want to acknowledge. But sex is assigned at birth.
3? I'm just trying to understand. I'm thoroughly confused. So you're born, I'm talking about biology, male, female, and what else?
I believe that intersex is also acknowledged. But again, I'm not a doctor here. What I can
And
say
what does intersex mean?
is that there's a difference between sex and gender. And I think in these conversations, we're conflating the two.
Well, but I want to start with sex. Okay, there's male, there's female. When a baby's born, before the baby has had time to even have a sense of self, there's male, female, and intersex. There's a third sex.
I believe that is true, but I would defer to Dr. Lopez as I'm not a physician.
Okay. And how many genders are there?
I think the gender is expansive, and the definitions are always growing. Today I can tell you, I talk to young people that talk about non-binary as
more than 5.
I think the gender is not a binary, is what I'm trying to say.
Are there more than 5 genders? I'm just trying to understand. Are there more than 5 genders?
Well, I think that there was a time where women wearing pants didn't feel like it was appropriate for their gender, and yet I'm wearing pants today. I think that there are ways that we express our gender that are expansive.
Are there more than 5?
I wouldn't subject myself to naming how many genders there are, but what I can say is that gender is a reflection.
Number?
Excuse me?
There's an infinite number of genders?
I think depending on your culture, there are a lot of different genders that exist. And I can also say that it's a term that's evolving. If you look at young people today, they really don't lean into the binary of only woman and man. So I think that it's incumbent upon us not to legislate on this, but create space for them to explore what their identities are, what their gender identities are.
Let's get back to athletics. I think I understand what you're saying. There are 3 sexes: male, female, and intersex.
I believe that to be true, but again, I'm not a physician.
And there are an infinite number of genders, because gender is a mental state.
Gender is about expression, and I think that there are a variety of ways that you can express your gender.
Okay, so there's infinite number. All right, let's go back to the biology. Male, female, boy, girl. Okay, biologically, do males have an advantage over females biologically in sports?
Again, I'm not a physician, and I can't speak to that.
What's your real-world experience?
It depends. There are some people who are born male that I'm faster than if I were to sprint against them, and some that I'm not. Some males that are taller than some women, and some that are shorter.
You don't believe that a biological male has a physical advantage in sports over a biological female?
Not as a definitive statement.
Give me an example. Well, no, I don't think. How many female members of the NBA do you see?
Well, I can say that, there's been this news article about men that think that they could beat Serena Williams in tennis, right? That they think that they could actually score a point on her. And it's just not the case. She is stronger than that.
What's your experience, Ben? male, female.
Both Serena and Venus lost to the 203rd ranked male tennis player, which they're phenoms for women. My experience, my husband, he swam at University of Kentucky as well. In terms of accolades and in terms of national ranking, I was a much better swimmer than him. He could kick my butt any day of the week without trying.
Okay. I just think, Ms. Robinson, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. I think you lose a lot of credibility when you don't concede that a biological male has physical advantages over a biological female. I mean, I just think that's a proven fact, and you really hurt your credibility. I understand you want the world to be a better place. I do too, and I don't think people ought to be discriminated against because of an immutable characteristic. I don't. And I think that I think everybody ought to be free to be themselves. And what you do in your bedroom or what I do in my bedroom with a consenting adult is nobody's business. But if what I do in my bedroom with a consenting adult, if I decide I want to tell somebody's child about it, then other people have rights too. And I think parents have rights. And I think biological females have rights to be able to compete fairly in sport in sports. So I really think you hurt your credibility when you refuse to acknowledge that biological males have an advantage over biological females. It kind of makes me wonder about all your testimony. Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Kennedy. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What I'm trying to say is that there is not a definitive advantage in all cases. Sir, I don't know if you believe that you could beat Serena Williams in tennis, but I probably think that that's not the case. There are not all cases where all men are physically superior to all women. And at the end of the day, in this conversation, we're not talking about that. We're talking about trans women who are, in fact, women, who deserve to play in a gender that matches their sports, who deserve all the benefits that Ms. Gaines is talking about. And as a cisgender black woman, I can say definitively that my womanhood is not threatened by a transgender person asserting hers as well.
Senator Hirono.
Before we get into this, make sure you subscribe because moments like this are exactly why so many Americans are losing trust in the political and cultural elites running these conversations. This exchange between Senator John Kennedy and this witness perfectly captured the disconnect between everyday Americans and the activist ideology that has completely taken over parts of academia, media, and government institutions. And what made this moment so powerful wasn't that Kennedy was yelling or trying to score cheap political points. It was the opposite. He stayed calm. He asked basic questions. Questions that most people outside of elite activist circles would consider incredibly simple. How many sexes are there? How many genders are there? Do biological males have physical advantages over biological females in sports? These are not complicated questions for most Americans. But somehow in this hearing they became impossible to answer directly. The witness kept trying to avoid giving a concrete answer. Every time Kennedy tried to pin down a definition, the conversation drifted into abstractions about expansive gender identities, evolving definitions, and cultural interpretations. And I think that's exactly why this clip is resonating with so many people online, because Americans are exhausted with this constant refusal to speak plainly. Kennedy wasn't even being especially aggressive here. He was practically guiding the witness step by step through basic biology. Male, female. Intersex, fine. But then once the conversation moved into gender ideology, suddenly there were no limits, no definitions, no boundaries, and no concrete standards at all. At one point Kennedy asks if there are more than 5 genders. And instead of getting an answer, he gets a lecture about women wearing pants. That right there sums up the frustration millions of people feel with these debates. Regular people are trying to understand what activists actually believe, and instead they get philosophical riddles and semantic gymnastics. And then came the sports discussion, which honestly may have been the most revealing part of the entire exchange. Kennedy asks a very simple question. Do biological males have physical advantages over biological females in sports? Again, the witness refuses to give a straightforward answer. Now think about how insane that is for a second. We're talking about a reality so obvious that virtually every major sport on Earth separates men and women by biology for a reason. The NBA, the NFL, Olympic weightlifting, track and field, swimming, soccer, tennis. Virtually all elite competition recognizes biological differences because pretending they don't exist destroys fairness. and Kennedy exposed the contradiction immediately. He brought up Serena and Venus Williams losing to the 203rd-ranked male tennis player. That's not disrespect to Serena Williams either. Serena is arguably the greatest female tennis player ever. But the point Kennedy was making is rooted in biology, not insults. Even the witness's own colleague admitted it with the swimming example. She openly acknowledged that despite being a more decorated swimmer than her husband, he could still dominate her physically without much effort. That honesty probably did more to answer Kennedy's question than the witness herself ever did. And this is where I think the broader political issue comes into play. A lot of Americans are not anti-trans. They're not hateful. They're not obsessed with these issues the way the media sometimes portrays them. What frustrates people is being told they have to deny obvious biological reality in order to be considered compassionate or modern. Most Americans can hold two thoughts in their head at the same time. They can believe people deserve dignity and respect while also believing biological differences are real, but activist ideology increasingly refuses to allow that middle ground. Everything becomes absolute. Everything becomes ideological. And anyone asking basic questions gets labeled ignorant or hateful. That's why clips like this matter politically. Because they expose how weak a lot of these arguments sound when they leave social media bubbles and enter public hearings where people are forced to explain themselves clearly. Kennedy's style also matters here. He has this calm, almost confused Southern delivery where he asks questions in a way that makes it difficult for witnesses to accuse him of hostility. He just keeps digging, slowly, patiently, and eventually the contradictions start piling up on their own. And honestly, I think that's why these moments go viral so often. The audience can see in real time that the witness is struggling to reconcile activist language with observable reality. At the end of the day, most Americans still believe fairness in women's sports matters. They still believe biology is real, and they still expect elected officials and public witnesses to answer simple questions with simple answers. This hearing showed exactly why the cultural backlash against gender ideology keeps growing instead of shrinking. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit like, subscribe, and comment below. Do you think Senator Kennedy exposed the weakness in these arguments, or do you think the witness was treated unfairly?